All right, so I want to start today with, well, with a sensation I think pretty much every single person listening has felt.
Okay.
And I mean, probably pretty recently, like within the last 48 hours, maybe even today.
I'm intrigued.
You're driving home from work. It's the same route, the one you've taken 1,000 times. You get in the car, you turn on the radio, you pull out of the parking lot,
Mm-hmm.
and then the next thing you know, you are pulling into your driveway. You look down at your hands on the wheel and you get this little jolt.
The jolt of realization.
Exactly. And you realize, I have absolutely no memory of the last 20 minutes. You know you didn't crash. You must have stopped at the red lights. You used your turn signal. But the conscious narrative part of you was just not there.
The classic highway hypnosis. It's universal.
Yeah.
And it's a little unsettling when you actually stop and think about it for a second.
It is. It's actually terrifying. Because the question that immediately pops into your head is, who was driving the car?
Right. If I wasn't there, who was?
And that question, who was there? It brings us right to the word that's sitting at the center of all our research for today. It's a word that I think for most of us, it sets off some serious alarm bells.
Yeah.
Dissociation.
Right. And that word is heavy. It carries a lot of baggage.
Massive baggage. When I hear dissociation, my brain doesn't go to my commute. It goes straight to clinical disorders. It goes to horror movies where the main character has a split personality.
Trauma, amnesia,
Yeah.
mental fracture.
Yeah. It just sounds like something is fundamentally broken.
And that is exactly the assumption that the sources we're diving into today want to challenge. The central argument we're looking at is that we've been viewing this entire concept through, like, a tiny pinhole.
How so?
We've been looking at the most extreme, the most pathological edge cases, and we've assumed that that's the whole picture. But the material we have today suggests that dissociation isn't just a disorder. It's actually a broad, fundamental, an umbrella of human cognition.
I like that. The umbrella analogy, it clicks for me because under that one umbrella, you can have wildly different experiences all huddled together.
Exactly. You have the person who is just staring out the window during a boring meeting.
We've all been that person.
And right next to them, under the same umbrella, you have the person experiencing a traumatic fracture of their identity. If we use the same word for both of those things without any nuance, we're going to run into some serious trouble.
So the mission for this deep dive is, well, it feels pretty ambitious. We are going to try to rescue this concept.
Rescue it. I like that.
Yeah, we want to take dissociation out of the box that's just labeled crazy and, put it out on the table so we can see it for what it might be. A basic human capacity.
A capacity. That's a really key shift in thinking right there. Instead of asking, what is wrong with me? The question becomes,
What is my mind doing and why is it doing it?
precisely. We're exploring the difference between losing yourself and, as one of our sources puts it, organizing yourself.
And to do that, we have this really unique roadmap. A bit later on, we are going to break down a fascinating case study. It's a discussion between a user, we'll just call him Max, and a therapist figure. And Max has built this system of 10 distinct subpersonalities to navigate his life.
Which just immediately sounds like what we were talking about before. It sounds like a disorder.
Right. But just to set the stakes here, Max is very clear. He does not identify as having dissociative identity disorder, or did-day. He's not talking about a disordered fracture. He claims these personalities are actually a healthy, functioning team.
Which challenges pretty much everything we're taught about what a healthy mind is supposed to look like. We're told you should be one, solid, consistent, like a block of stone.
Right, inflexible.
But Max is arguing that he's more like a mosaic, and that the mosaic is actually stronger for having all those different pieces.
So if you've ever felt like you have to be a different person at work than you are with your friends, or if you've ever felt like you're kind of acting your way through a social situation, this deep dive is going to give you a whole new language for that feeling.
But before we can get to Max's mosaic, we have to deal with the language problem itself.
We do, because the words we use, they shape our reality. And right now, our vocabulary for this whole area it's just sloppy.
It's sloppy and it's damaging.
It's like we have one word, let's say, pain, to describe both a paper cut and a shattered femur.
That is a perfect analogy. Technically, yes, both are pain. But if you go to a doctor and say, I'm in pain, and they treat your broken leg with a Band-Aid because they assume it's a paper cut,
You're in a lot of trouble.
you're in a lot of trouble. Or, vice versa, if they try to put a full cast on your paper cut. It's absurd.
And the sources point out that this linguistic laziness, just slapping the label dissociation on everything, causes two huge, distinct problems.
The first one is that it really minimizes the serious stuff. If everyone on social media is saying, oh my God, I'm so dissociated right now, just because they're a little tired or spaced out,
Which they do all the time.
it completely strips the gravity away from people who are suffering from genuine, debilitating detachment. People who literally do not know who they are or where they've been for the last 3 days.
It just dilutes the term into meaninglessness. But there's a second problem, right? Which is almost the inverse of that.
Right. It pathologizes normal, everyday cognition. If we treat any departure from the immediate here and now as a symptom of a mental illness, then we are basically saying that the human imagination is a disease.
That's a heavy statement. But it makes sense. We often feel guilty for daydreaming. We feel like we should be laser-focused on reality 24/7.
Which is just biological nonsense. The human mind was designed to leave the here and now. That's how we plan for the future. It's how we process memories from the past. It's how we tell stories.
It's how we're creative.
It's how we're creative.
Yeah.
So if we really want to understand Max, and frankly, if we want to understand ourselves, we need a better vocabulary. We have to stop thinking in these black and white binary terms of sane versus insane.
And the source material offers this framework that I found incredibly helpful for that. It's a traffic light system. I love this because it's so visual. It takes this big, scary, monolithic concept and breaks it down onto a spectrum.
It's a tiered vocabulary. It gives us nuance. So let's start at the bottom, the green light. This is your everyday, non-clinical dissociation.
Okay, green light. This is the stuff we all do all the time. This is the highway hypnosis we already talked about.
Yeah.
This is daydreaming while you're doing the dishes. This is getting totally sucked into a book or a video game.
Let's look at the mechanics of that video game example for a second. Let's say you're playing a really immersive game. You are technically sitting on a couch in your living room. There is a refrigerator humming in the kitchen. Maybe you can hear traffic outside. But your brain has just turned the volume knob way, way down on all of that external input. Your awareness of your physical surroundings has dropped to almost zero.
And at the same time, your inner focus on the screen, on the game world, the story has been dialed up to 11.
Exactly. So technically, you have dissociated from your immediate physical environment. You are not there. But, and this is the absolute crucial part, is that a disorder?
No, of course not. It's fun. It's a feature of being human, not a bug.
It's a feature. It allows for what psychologists call flow states. Athletes get into this. Musicians, writers, surgeons. You have to shut out the distractions to perform at a high level.
So what are the key traits of this green light zone?
The key characteristics are, one, it is voluntary, or at least semi-voluntary. You chose to sit down and play the game.
Right. It didn't just happen to me against my will. I chose to enter that world.
Two, you maintain your agency. If the smoke alarm goes off in your house, you will snap out of it instantly. You don't stare at the beeping light wondering what it is. You immediately reintegrate with physical reality because there's a priority alert.
And you remember everything.
And three, yes, your memory is continuous. You don't wake up an hour later in a panic wondering who you are. You just think, wow, an hour just flew by.
So the verdict here is pretty clear. Green light dissociation is just normal human cognition. It's how we rest, it's how we play, it's how we do deep work.
Correct. It's completely healthy. But then, of course, we move up the spectrum, and the light turns yellow.
The yellow light. The source describes this zone as functional but risky.
This is the gray area. It's a big gray area. This is where things like maladaptive daydreaming or chronic zoning out start to appear. And this is often where it gets confused with things like ADHD, which we'll get into a bit later.
So give me a concrete example of a yellow light scenario. What does that look like?
Okay, so imagine you have a very stressful job. Every day, your boss comes over to your desk and yells at you about something. Instead of engaging with that conflict or setting a boundary or quitting, you go away.
Mentally.
Mentally.
Yeah.
You retreat into a fantasy world inside your head where you're successful and respected and calm. You're physically there. You're nodding at your boss, but you're mentally on a beach in Hawaii.
Okay. I think a lot of people can probably relate to that. It's a defense mechanism.
And in the short term, it absolutely works. It regulates your nervous system. It stops you from screaming at your boss or bursting into tears.
Yeah.
In that moment, it's adaptive. That's why it's not in the red zone yet.
But it's risky.
It's risky. Because what happens if that becomes your only move every time there's a conflict?
Then you never actually solve the problem. You never set the boundary. You never update your resume. You just keep disappearing.
Exactly. It becomes maladaptive if it replaces your real-world coping mechanisms. If you spend 8 hours a day living in a fantasy world because your real life is too painful to look at, You are firmly in the yellow light. You're functional. You're keeping the job. You're paying your bills. But you aren't really living your life.
You're ghosting your own existence.
That's a great way to put it. Ghosting your own existence. It works until one day it doesn't.
And when it stops working or when the mechanism breaks entirely, we hit the red light.
This is clinical dissociation. And I want to be very, very clear here. The sources are emphatic that this is a different category of experience. This is not just intense daydreaming.
This is where we see the severe symptoms. We're talking about things like dissociative identity disorder, depersonalization, derealization.
Yes, we were talking about amnesia, genuine lost time. I kind of forgot the drive home, but I looked at the calendar and it's Tuesday. The very last thing I remember is it being Friday.
Finding things in your house you don't remember buying.
Right. Finding clothes in your closet you don't recognize, in a size you don't wear. That's the classic diagnostic marker for DD, isn't it? The evidence of a life being lived without you there to witness it.
It's terrifying.
And we're talking about depersonalization that is deeply, deeply distressing. The feeling that you are a robot just going through the motions, the feeling that your own hands don't belong to you, the feeling that the world around you is fake like it's made of cardboard. This isn't a cool, immersive flow state. It's a nightmare.
The expert in the text makes a really interesting distinction here about how we diagnose this stuff. They say the key isn't how weird the experience sounds to someone else.
Right. This is so important. You can have a very complex, weird, internal, lifelike Max, our case study, who has 10 distinct personalities living in his head. That sounds incredibly weird to the average person on the street.
It does.
But the clinical line in the sand, the thing that separates weird from unwell, is two questions. Is there impairment and is there distress?
So if Max is holding down a job, has good relationships, and isn't distressed by his internal system, he's not in the red light.
Exactly. Pathology requires suffering. If the system works for him, if it helps him navigate the world successfully, it's not a disease, it's an adaptation, a very sophisticated one.
That leads us perfectly to what I think is maybe the most practical tool in this entire packet of research, because I know there are listeners right now thinking, okay, I zone out a lot. Where do I fall on this spectrum? Am I green or am I yellow? And the source gives us this simple heuristic. It's called the return test.
It's such a simple, elegant little tool. Because the question isn't, did I leave? Everybody leaves reality sometimes. That's a given. The question is, can I return?
Can I return? I love that. It's the checking back in rule.
Right. So you can try it yourself. You're zoning out. You're deep in a thought spiral about something. Can you right now snap out of it at will? If your partner were to walk into the room and ask you a question, could you pivot and answer them coherently?
And do you return to your body intact?
Exactly. If the answer is yes, you're almost certainly in non-clinical territory. You were exploring, you were playing, you were just resting your brain. It's green light.
But if the answer is no, if you feel stuck like you're screaming from behind a glass wall and can't get out, or if you come back and you can't remember where you've just been.
That is a distress signal. That is the red light flashing on your dashboard.
Okay, but what if the answer is sometimes? What if mostly I can come back, but every now and then I feel a little stuck?
Then you watch it. You pay attention to it. It doesn't mean you're broken, but it means your nervous system is trying to tell you something. Maybe you're overwhelmed. Maybe you're burning out. It's a sign to look closer.
Which brings us to this other framework the source lays out, moving beyond good versus bad and into a kind of matrix with 3 axes: agency, integration, and impact.
Yeah, this really helps clarify the yellow zone.
So let's unpack those 3 because they really act as the compass here. Agency is the first one. That's the steering wheel.
Who is driving the bus? Is it, I am choosing to disengage for a moment because I need a break? That's high agency. That's healthy. Or is it, this is happening to me and I can't stop it? That's low agency. That's where the trouble starts to creep in.
Okay, so agency is who's in control. Then there's integration. I like to think of this as the baggage claim at the airport.
I like that. Does your luggage arrive with you when you land?
Exactly. When you come back from the trip, the daydream, the flow state, whatever it was, do you have your memories? Is your narrative, your sense of self, still intact?
Integration is the difference between a journey and a blackout. If you go on a trip and you come back with photos and memories and a new perspective, that's integration. If you wake up in a different city with no idea how you got there, that's disintegration.
And finally, there's impact. This is the bottom line. Does this habit, this tendency to check out, make your life bigger or smaller?
This is probably the most subjective one, but it's also the most important. Does this habit expand your life? Does it bring you clarity, calm, insight? Or does it shrink your life? Does it lead to avoidance, missed opportunities, and just feeling depleted?
This connects directly to another concept in the source material, the idea of healing versus numbing dissociation, which I think is the defining battle of the modern digital age.
It really, really is.
Yeah.
We are all dissociating constantly. The question is, are we using it to heal or are we using it to numb?
To break down that difference for us.
Healing dissociation is when you return with an insight. Think about deep meditation. You are technically dissociating. You are leaving the immediate sensory world to go inward. Think about prayer. Think about dreaming at night. Even getting lost in a really profound book or piece of music.
You leave.
You leave, but when you return, you have something new. You've processed an emotion you were stuck on. You have a new perspective on a problem. You are enriched by the experience.
Okay. And numbing dissociation, what does that look like?
Numbing dissociation returns you unchanged, or very often more depleted than when you started. The classic example is the doom scroll.
Oh, the doom scroll. That 45 minutes on TikTok or Instagram where you aren't even really watching the videos anymore. You're just swiping.
You're just swiping, your eyes are glazed over, you have completely checked out of your life. But when you finally put the phone down, do you feel rested? Do you feel inspired?
No. I feel like a hollowed out gourd. I feel worse. I feel anxious and drained.
That is numbing. You weren't resting, you were just pausing your own existence. You hit the pause button on being alive because it was too much to handle, but you didn't actually do anything restorative in that time.
That distinction is so incredibly helpful. It's not about the act of checking out. It's about the quality of the return.
Exactly. If you come back empty-handed, it was numbing. If you come back with a gift, even a small one, it was probably healing.
Now, I want to pivot here slightly, because we've mentioned ADHD a couple times, and the source material spends a good amount of time on this particular confusion. People say, I spaced out, did I dissociate, or I have ADHD. Is that the same as a trauma response?
This is one of the most common and important mix-ups, and for good reason. On the surface, the behavior looks identical.
Right.
You're in a classroom, the teacher's groaning on about algebra, and suddenly you snap back to reality and realize you haven't heard a single word for the last 10 minutes. You spaced out.
So if you're the teacher looking at that student, or if you're the doctor listening to that patient describe their day, you just see the same thing, lack of focus.
Right. But the internal mechanism, the engine that is driving that experience, is often completely opposite.
Let's break down the ADHD side of it first. What's going on in the brain there?
In ADHD-like dissociation or inattentiveness, the driver is usually a regulation issue, specifically with dopamine and executive function. The mechanism is understimulation. The brain is bored. It is literally starving for interesting input.
It's like a shark. It has to keep moving to survive. If the lecture is boring and slow, the brain says, I'm dying in here. I need to go find something interesting to think about.
Exactly. It's an active search for novelty. So the mind wanders off to think about a movie you saw or a project you're excited about or a song you like. It's an active search for stimulation. Subjectively, the experience is, my mind wandered.
Wow.
And crucially, your identity and your agency remain intact. You know who you are. You just got distracted.
Okay, so that's the boredom engine. Now contrast that with trauma-based dissociation.
Trauma-based dissociation is a protection issue. The driver is threat or pain. The mechanism is overstimulation. The nervous system is completely overwhelmed. It detects a threat, which could be a loud noise, an angry tone of voice, or even just an internal memory trigger, and it pulls the emergency brake.
So instead of seeking out more input, it's actively trying to shut down all input.
Precisely. It's the freeze response in the fight, flight, freeze, fawn model. The system says, this is too much, I can't handle it, I'm cutting the feed. Subjectively, the experience isn't my mind wandered off. It's I disappeared, or the world went very far away.
So one is running away from boredom and the other is running away from danger.
That is the perfect way to frame it.
No.
And in that trauma response, agency is compromised. Body awareness drops significantly. You might not feel your feet on the floor anymore. You feel disconnected from yourself.
But because our diagnostic systems, especially here in the West, they prioritize observable behavior, we just group them together. We look at the kids staring out the window and we ask, is the patient paying attention?
And if the answer is no, we slap on a label of dysfunction. We don't ask the next question, which is why. We don't ask if they are bored or if they're terrified. And treating a terrified kid with strategies meant for a bored kid or vice versa can be really, really harmful.
It really highlights how much our culture shapes our view of the mind. The source material has this fascinating section on Western versus non-Western frameworks, and honestly, it made me look at my own education completely differently.
It's a very provocative section. The Western view is, at its core, very productivity-focused. We are a capitalist industrial society.
Mm.
So when we look at any mental state, our primary question is it impairing your ability to work?
Right. Can you still clock in and be a productive member of society?
We see dissociation as a malfunction because it stops you from being a productive unit. We value the output, not the internal process that creates it.
Whereas many non-Western views, and the source cites various indigenous and Eastern traditions here, they often start with a totally different question.
They ask, what is this state for? There's a built-in recognition that leaving the everyday, task-oriented mind can be a source of wisdom or healing. They differentiate between voluntary states like ritual, trance, deep meditation, and involuntary ones. But they don't automatically assume that leaving is a bad thing. In fact, in many cultures, the ability to intentionally detach from immediate reality is seen as a skill, one that's required for spiritual insight.
And here's where it gets really spicy. The source argues that our Western culture, specifically our school system and our corporate work environments, doesn't just pathologize this, it actually trains us to dissociate in a maladaptive way.
When you really sit down and look at it, the argument holds a lot of water. Think about a standard classroom. You are 6 years old, you have a body that is desperate to run and jump and wiggle. You have a brain that is buzzing with curiosity. But you are put in a hard chair for 6 hours a day. You are bored, you are physically uncomfortable. And what are you told over and over again?
Sit still, pay attention, don't fidget. You can go to the bathroom at recess.
Exactly. You are taught, systemically, to ignore your body's discomfort. You are taught to suppress your brain's natural impulse for novelty and exploration. You are effectively trained to leave the body internally while remaining externally functional.
Wow. So the good student, the one who gets the gold star, is often just the student who has learned to dissociate from their own needs the most effectively.
In many cases, yes. We reward the child who can successfully disconnect from their physical and emotional urges in order to comply with the demands of the system. And then, 20 years later, when that same person's brain uses that same skill dissociating to handle the stress of a deadline or a horrible boss, we call it a disorder. But really, it's a learned skill. It's a coping mechanism that was installed and reinforced for years.
That's heavy. It reframes the whole conversation. We aren't just broken, we are adapted. We adapted to a system that demanded we split ourselves in two.
And that concept of adaptation is the absolute perfect bridge to our central case study. Because if we want to talk about sophisticated adaptation, we have to talk about Max.
Max is just fascinating. This is the user who provided the core source material for this analysis. Now, we need to reiterate this again. Max is explicit that he does not identify with having a disorder. He doesn't feel broken, but he identifies as having 10 subpersonalities.
And this is where we have to apply our new, more nuanced vocabulary. Max argues that this is not a case of losing himself. It is a case of organizing himself. It is distinct from clinical dissociative identity disorder because, 1, there is no amnesia, 2, there are no involuntary uncontrolled switches, and 3, this is the most important part, the parts communicate with each other. They are a team.
I want to introduce this team. Because when I first read this list of personalities, I was expecting, random archetypal characters, the jester, the warrior, that kind of thing. But these are incredibly specific, and they map so perfectly onto a human life timeline. It's extraordinary.
They are not random at all. That's maybe the most important takeaway. They are, as the source calls them, adaptive roles. They are specialized tools that were built to solve specific life problems at specific times.
So let's walk through the cast of characters here. We start in childhood. The source lists 3 primary figures that emerged for Max then: Tommy, Kenny, and Kelly.
Right. So just think about what a small child needs to navigate the world. First, a child needs to learn. That's Tommy. Tommy is the oldest part of the system. He represents curiosity, tinkering, learning by doing. He's the part of Max that engages with the physical world through play and taking things apart to see how they work. He's the engine of growth.
But a kid who only explores, who only follows their curiosity, is going to get hurt, or at least get in a lot of trouble.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so, enter Kenny. Kenny is the childhood risk manager. His internal motto is basically, let's not get caught. He's grounded, he's practical, he's the little voice in the head that says, hey, maybe don't climb that rusty fence, or maybe we should hide the broken vase. He keeps Tommy alive and out of trouble.
And then there's Kelly. She feels different.
Kelly is fascinating because she represents the deep, primal need for emotional safety. Every child needs soothing, comfort, nurture. If the outside world, parents, teachers, whoever, isn't providing enough of that comfort, a resilient mind might just create an internal source for it. Kelly is early attachment and nurture. She provides that emotional safety and comfort when the external environment is cold or unpredictable. She's the internal mother, in a way.
So you have the explorer, the safety officer, and the nurturer. That is a complete survival kit for a kid. It's a whole executive team.
It is. It's a fully functional childhood system. But then, of course, Max hits middle school. And anyone who remembers middle school knows the game completely changes.
Yeah, the game gets brutal. The social pressure spikes. You become hyper aware of what other people think of you. And so the cast expands. We get two new members, Addie and Bannock.
And just look at the function of these two. Middle school's heavy. It's awkward. You're insecure. It can be a really joyless time for a lot of kids. Addie emerges to provide emotional lightness, hope, and play. Addie is the counterweight to all that teenage heaviness. She's the one who remembers how to have fun and be silly. She keeps the spark alive.
And Bannock. He sounds like the total opposite.
He is. Bannock is duty, leadership, structure. He's the part that holds the line. In the absolute chaos of puberty and shifting social rules, Bannock is the spine. He's the one who makes sure the homework gets done on time. He's the one who makes sure Max doesn't completely fall apart into a puddle of hormones and anxiety.
So you have joy and duty. Again, it's a perfect balance. Then high school comes along. The hierarchy gets even more solidified. It's not just about fitting in anymore. It can feel like it's about pure survival. And we see three new, very powerful personalities emerge. Liz, Devin, and Tira.
This is the heavy hitter phase, for sure. Liz is all about power, persuasion, and visibility. High school is a status game, whether we like it or not. Liz is the part that protects Max from social erasure, from becoming invisible. She knows how to talk to people, how to be seen, how to navigate the complex social landscape.
She's the PR manager and the bodyguard all in one.
In a way, yes. But then look at Devin. Devin is almost the polar opposite of Liz. Devin is solitude, endurance, emotional containment. Devin is the part of the system that can survive the cold. If Liz's social maneuvering fails, or if Max is rejected or bullied, Devin is the one who says, I don't need them anyway. I can survive on my own. I'm strong enough.
Devin is the internal fortress.
Yes. And Tira. Kara is the synthesizer, the meaning maker. High school is a time of intense existential confusion. Who am I? What does any of this mean? Tira is reflection, wisdom, synthesis. She's the meta-observer who tries to step back from the chaos and find a pattern, find a meaning in it all.
And finally, we hit college. Autonomy kicks in for real. You aren't under your parents' roof anymore. You have to build your own life from scratch. And we get the last two, Mac and Val.
Mac is humor, adaptability, and social smoothing. College is full of new, unstructured social worlds. You need social glue to navigate that. That's Mac. He helps Max get through parties, new dorms, new friend groups, without friction. He's the charming, easygoing one.
And Val seems to be the one who gets the degree.
Val is discipline, excellence, and standards. Val is about self-authorship. In college, for the first time, no one is telling you to go to class or do your reading. You have to decide to be excellent for yourself. Val is the part that decides, I am going to be this kind of person, and I will hold myself to that standard.
It's just incredible when you lay it out like that. You can see the timeline of human development perfectly. It's not a fractured mind. It's a toolbox that kept getting upgraded with new specialized tools.
You really can. Age 6, abstract thinking blooms, so you get Tommy and Kenny for exploration and rules. Middle school, social pressure mounts, so you get Addie and Bannock for joy and duty. High school, isolation and hierarchy become huge issues, so you get Liz, Devin, and Tira for power, survival, and meaning. College. Autonomy is the main challenge, so you get Mac and Val for social adaptation and self-regulation.
It's like Max built a specialized app for every major developmental challenge he faced.
Exactly, and the key expert insight here is that Max didn't fragment to escape reality. Max differentiated to adapt to reality. This is internal specialization. It's actually a highly intelligent strategy.
Your corporations do this.
Corporations do this all the time. They have a marketing department and an accounting department and an R&D department. Why? Because the skills required for brilliant marketing are very different from the skills required for meticulous accounting. Max just did that internally. He departmentalized his own mind.
But, and there is always a but, this brings us to the friction. Because while the system works beautifully for Max internally, it creates a massive problem for him externally. Max talks about this constant feeling of being fake.
This is a very, very common experience for people with high internal differentiation. Max says, and this is a direct quote from the material, I feel like I'm being fake or acting when I'm trying to be myself.
Which just sounds so contradictory. How can you be acting if you're trying to be yourself? If Liz is a legitimate part of him, why does being Liz feel like a lie?
The source analyzes this beautifully. The issue is not that Max is fake. The issue is that Max lives in high resolution, while society at large operates in low resolution.
Okay, unpack that. High res versus low res. I like that framing.
Society rewards consistency. We like a single brand identity in a person. We want you to be the same person at work, at home, and at the party on Saturday night. It's predictable. It's easy for us to consume and categorize. When I meet you, I want to be able to file you away in a little box in my head. He's the funny guy, or she is the serious one.
Right. We want characters from a sitcom who have one defining trait. We don't want complexity.
Exactly. But Max isn't a sitcom character. Max naturally and intelligently shifts roles to match the context. When he's at a party, Mac is driving the bus. When he's working on a difficult project, Val is driving. When he feels threatened, Kenny might take the wheel for a second. That is honest adaptation. Max is using the right tool for the job. But to an outside observer who expects a static character, that shifting looks like performance. It looks like he's being inconsistent or fake.
So the internal friction comes from the fact that Max is doing something incredibly sophisticated. He's matching the self to the moment, but it reads as dishonest to a world that wants cartoon characters who never change.
Precisely. And this leads to what Max calls the maze problem.
The maze. I think anyone who has ever tried to explain a complex feeling to a partner or a friend knows this feeling intimately.
It's the exhaustion of explanation. Max feels like, to be understood, he has to create different entry points for different people. He has to constantly curate the version of himself that he thinks will make sense to you.
That sounds absolutely exhausting. You're constantly managing the other person's interpretation load. Okay, if I tell them about Liz, are they going to think I'm manipulative? If I tell them about Devin, will they think I'm a depressed loner?
And the fear behind that is so deep. The fear is, if an entry point fails, if you try to explain your complexity and the other person looks at you like you're crazy or says you're just being dramatic, it feels like a fundamental rejection of the self. Not just a misunderstanding of a mood, but a rejection of your core architecture. So you end up trapped in this maze, constantly calculating, how much of my real self can I show this person before they freak out?
So what is the solution? Because we can't just walk around handing out user manuals for our brains. We can't say, hi, nice to meet you. Please read this 20-page document on my internal cast of characters before we order coffee.
No, you can't. And that's where the source introduces a strategy that I think is the absolute gold nugget of this entire deep dive. It's a concept called compression without betrayal.
Compression without betrayal. I love the sound of that. It's so precise.
It's a communication strategy. The goal is to reduce the level of detail in your explanation, to compress the file, so to speak, while preserving the essential shape of the truth.
Okay, so give us the rule. How do we do this in practice?
The core rule is this: never compress across a boundary that fundamentally changes the meaning. You can simplify, but you cannot falsify. For example, Max should not say, I have multiple personalities, if what he means is, I have different internal roles.
Why not?
Because the phrase multiple personalities implies a specific clinical disorder, DD, which comes with amnesia and loss of control, things that Max doesn't experience. Using that phrase changes the meaning. That is a betrayal of his truth. It misleads the listener and invites misdiagnosis.
So it's about finding a simpler way to say it that is still completely true. It's about adjusting the resolution of the image you're presenting.
Exactly. Yeah. And the source suggests having different levels of explanation ready. You don't owe everyone level 3 top secret clearance access to your mind. You don't owe the barista your entire trauma history.
Let's go through the levels because this is really actionable stuff. Level 1 is the social safe level.
Level 1 is for your coworker, your casual acquaintance, your aunt at Thanksgiving. You say things like, I tend to think in different roles, or I have different modes for different situations, or my personal favorite, I'm very compartmental aware.
That's so clean. It makes perfect sense. Nobody calls the asylum. They just nod and think, oh, he's a self-aware person.
Right? It's true, but it's compressed. It's a low-resolution JPEG of the truth. But it is not a lie.
Okay, what's level 2?
Level 2 is for the curious listener. This is maybe a good friend who notices you switch gears. They might say, hey, you got really quiet all of a sudden. What happened? You might give them a little more. You might say, I use named internal roles to understand myself better. It helps me stay integrated. Sometimes I just have to step back into a quieter mode to handle stress.
You're giving them a little peek behind the curtain. You're acknowledging the mechanism without giving them the whole blueprint. And level 3.
Level 3 is earned access. This is for your partner, your therapist, your most trusted friend. This is the full system breakdown. This is, okay, let me introduce you to Tommy and Liz. Here is why I act this way when I'm scared, and here's who helps me be brave.
I really like that phrase, earned access. You don't owe the world your full, uncompressed, high-resolution self.
You really don't. Depth always requires gates. You wouldn't let a total stranger just walk into your bedroom and go through your drawers. Why would you let them walk into the deepest, most vulnerable parts of your psyche?
The source also provides a vocabulary toolkit, which is super helpful because, as we've discussed, words like dissociation and especially subpersonalities are so loaded. If you drop subpersonalities on a first date, you might not get a second one.
Laughs. Probably not. Subpersonalities is technically accurate for Max, but it's a high-friction word. You have to stop and define it every single time or people get scared and make assumptions.
So what are some of the safer, more portable alternatives?
Modes or facets are great. They're very safe, high portability terms. Everyone understands having different sides to their personality or different facets of a diamond. It implies you are still one unified thing, just being viewed from different angles.
I like internal pass. That one feels very creative.
Internal cast is fantastic, especially for creatives or writers. It frames the experience as a creative resource. I have a cast of characters inside that I can draw on for different situations. It sounds like a strength, which it is.
And then there's personas, which has a deep historical precedent.
It does, and I think this is so important for validation. This isn't some new Gen Z TikTok trend. This is ancient. The philosopher Nietzsche wrote as Zarathustra. He wrote as the psychologist. He used different authorial voices to explore different truths.
The psychoanalyst Carl Jung talked about the persona versus the self.
Exactly. The persona is the mask we present to the world. Virginia Woolf wrote endlessly about fluid, multiple identities, and David Bowie had Ziggy Stardust.
Oh, Bowie is the perfect example. Was he lying when he was on stage as Ziggy Stardust? Was he being fake?
No, of course not. He was using a mask to tell a truth that his ordinary, everyday voice couldn't carry. These great artists and thinkers used masks not to lie, but to reveal. Sometimes, you need the mask of a specific persona to feel safe enough to speak your deepest truth.
That is such a powerful reframe. It all comes down to, I'm one person with many internal roles, and I get to choose how much of that intricate reality I share with you.
That's the final reframe. You are the conductor of the choir. You aren't pretending to be the tenor when you sing a high note. You have a tenor section in your choir. And sometimes, you need a tenor to sing the solo. That doesn't mean the bass section has disappeared. It just means they aren't the right voice for this particular piece of music.
So let's try and wrap this all up. We've covered a lot of ground today. We've gone from the traffic light of dissociation, the neurobiology of ADHD, to Max's incredible internal team, all the way to the philosophy of David Bowie. What are the key takeaways you think people should leave with from this deep dive?
I think there are three big ones. First, dissociation is a fundamental human capacity. Not just a cure or a curse, it's a spectrum. It's a tool your brain uses to handle information and stress.
Okay, one.
Two, health isn't defined by how normal you look or how consistent you are. It's defined by those three axes: agency, integration, and impact. Can you steer the car? Do you remember the trip? And does it help you live a better, fuller life?
And the third takeaway.
Third, and maybe most importantly for people who feel like Max, internal multiplicity having parts or subpersonalities or just distinct modes can be a sign of high-functioning adaptation, not a disorder. If it's integrated and it works for you, it's a superpower. It allows you to be the right person for the right moment.
I want to leave everyone with a final thought, something to chew on. We spend so much of our lives trying to present this consistent, flat, simple version of ourselves to the world because we think that's what sanity or authenticity is supposed to look like. We polish off all our interesting edges so we fit neatly into the box society gives us.
But maybe the most honest way to be human isn't to pretend to be a monolith. We aren't stones, we are rivers, with different currents running at different depths.
Exactly. Unconscious, uncontrolled dissociation is the problem. But chosen dissociation, where you hold the return ticket in your hand, that's a tool. So here's the question to leave you with. In a world that demands you be one consistent thing, perhaps the most honest way to be human is to admit that we are a choir, not a soloist. Are you suppressing your own complexity just to make yourself easier for others to consume?
That is the question, and it's one worth sitting with for a while.
Thanks for diving deep with us. We'll see you next time.